Thank you very much, Emily. At least you can see from your name that you're one of us. We just loaned you to the West Africans, and that is good. And
to Africa, not to West Africa, it's to Africa.
Yes, the whole of Africa. Yes, absolutely. But you're residing in West Africa at the moment, aren't you?
Yes,
All
I
right,
am.
right.
Yes, I am.
I can also see you're from my alma mater, Egerton University. That is where all the
lovely.
That is where all the great agricultural brains come from. So,
except I was doing maths and economics, but you have to at least get in.
It doesn't matter. You are there. It doesn't matter what you did. You are there. So it rubbed off on you.
Yes, so, you know, when I was told that it's Strathmore University that is requesting, my chief of staff is also from East Africa, from Uganda. So he told me, we have a request from Strathmore. What do you think? Can you represent us? And I said, any day, you know. Dr. Njenga is from my village in Eldoret. So basically we have to support one another in all this work moving forward. And maybe just to inform Dr. Mbaya, I actually have one of your very recent alumni, Dafina, who is working with us now here in Accra, Ghana. So we are already pushing and flying the flag quite high on the importance of our institutions back in Africa. And I say back in Africa, like I'm not in Africa, back in Kenya. So basically, it's really great to also see the work that you're doing in Strathmore, because if you can be able to have a very recent alumni being able to understand these international trade issues and to be one of us already, that already shows that the work that you're doing there, we truly appreciate it, and we shall continue supporting you whenever we are able to. So it's really an honor to be with you today, and it gives me great joy to actually come to this meeting. Unfortunately, I couldn't come and be with you from very early in the morning. As you're aware, we are 3 hours behind you. So that was the time I'm taking care of the children to go to school. So there was a bit of, you have to do your other side, as Professor Karaka can tell you. You also have to take care of the other side and not only the business side. But I'll just get on. Is that okay, Professor? Can I go on now?
Yes. And I'll hand over now to Professor Kiraka. Let's give a full Strathmore Kenyan welcome to our chief guest. Over to you, Professor.
Yes. Emily, by all means, please proceed. As Martin has reminded us, we are way behind schedule, and I can see people are getting hungry. So I think without further ado, let's hear from you. Thanks, Emily.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Professor. Let me start by saying to all of you, greetings from Accra, Ghana. As you heard, we are 3 hours behind, so we are not yet ready for lunch. But I guess for you guys, it is now moving on to lunchtime. As the AfCFTA Secretariat, we are very pleased to engage in this important conference, which deals with a critical issue that we are also working on here at the AfCFTA Secretariat. And maybe just as a way of information, we will also be looking at the different value chain, and the agribusiness sector has been identified as one of the important areas that we have to develop our value chain for Africans. So this conference is very critical for us, and it will be part of the information that we shall be even taking forward to inform our work on the development of the value chain. I bring you greetings from His Excellency Wamkele Mene, our Secretary General here at the AfCFTA Secretariat, and a true champion of SMEs engagement and development at the continental level. Under whose leadership, the Secretariat is working tirelessly to ensure that the AfCFTA Secretariat fulfills the aspirations of the African Union Agenda 2063. And as you may be aware, the AfCFTA itself is one of the what we call flagship projects of the African Union. So it was quite encouraging even for the private sector to actually have one of these AU flagships actually implemented with the coming into force of the AfCFTA, which entered into force on 30th of May 2019 after receiving 22 ratifications from the AU member states. Now, once you become once you've ratified and are a member of the AfCFTA agreement, then we call you state parties. So as of now, we have 38 state parties, and we have 3 more countries, the latest being our neighbor, United Republic of Tanzania, that ratified just the other day, which makes it 5 East African Community member states, or partner states as they call themselves, that have ratified the AfCFTA agreement. And it's only the Republic of South Sudan that have not yet ratified. But as you may be aware, they also have not yet fully, completely joined the customs union. So that means that the members of the customs union now are all state parties of the AfCFTA. And so now the EAC can actually speak in one voice, even here at the AfCFTA. Maybe just to mention that the aspirations of the African Union Agenda 2063 is to deliver on the promise to improve the lives of the people of Africa through inclusive trade policies that ensure that the engagement and development of small to medium-sized enterprises, especially in the agricultural sector, is realized. So, and that is my intention to say that this meeting is very important for us, even here at the AfCFTA Secretariat. Maybe just a bit of statistics. I know you've had a number of it, but it is important to reiterate that the AfCFTA is much more than a commercial agreement. We are also taking ourselves as the AfCFTA as a development tool to not only integrate Africa, but to also increase intra-African trade across the region. And maybe here I can mention that together with the Afrexim Bank, the AU and ourselves, we are organizing what is called the Intra-African Trade Fair that will be held in Durban from the 15th to the 21st of November. So if possible, I believe that would be a very important trade fair that can be attended by most of the people who are actually in this meeting. And maybe one other thing that I can mention is the fact that when we talk about including everyone and having full inclusion, we actually do have a very strong program for women and young people in trade. So basically, we are hoping that in all the different areas, we will then be able to include issues and deal with some of the challenges that women and young people deal with in trade. Now, according to the African Development Bank, and this is in 2019, the AfCFTA may enhance intra-African commerce by up to 15%. And according to a World Bank report of 2020, the removal of non-tariff barriers and improving trade facilitation would result in a 29% rise in exports, and that is by 2035, just in a few more years, with intra-African exports actually growing by 81%. So you can actually see the projections that if we implement the AfCFTA well, then there is going to be a great increase and improvement even in the standards of living of our people. Furthermore, these same reports indicate that by 2035, if the AfCFTA is implemented successfully, it has the potential to raise more than 100 million Africans out of poverty. So if we are 1.2 billion and we are able to raise 100 million Africans out of poverty, it already shows that we have a very high number that is in poverty right now. They say nearly about 50% of Africans are in the poverty margins. That is, I believe now it's $1.2 per day. They live on $1.2 per day. So we hope that the AfCFTA will be instrumental in raising those numbers out of poverty. These figures therefore demonstrate the AfCFTA's enormous potential for African governments and companies throughout the region And with the submission that I've mentioned of 38 countries that have ratified, being instrumental to the AfCFTA now being a reality and the benefits of it being realized. Now, the question then is, what are the specific opportunities that agribusiness SMEs can leverage from the AfCFTA? Now, before I discuss the opportunities present, I think it's crucial, and it has come out even in the little part of the discussions that I have listened to, there's some of the challenges that are faced by SMEs in their day-to-day activities. And this will give us a broader picture of where the current problem is. And so what are we trying to solve even through the AfCFTA? Some of the challenges include lack of finance, lack of infrastructure, lack of network, lack of information, lack of production facilities, challenges in compliance with global regulations, and lack of a big market to test one's goods. Now with this background, we can now explore and highlight some of the potential possibilities and benefits that exist in the regional value chains that will be pursued under the AfCFTA that may be leveraged to address some of the issues that I have mentioned and have been mentioned by earlier speakers. Now, fostering continental integration, the AfCFTA lays the background for a made in Africa revolution. And this is in terms of expanding and deepening regional value chains. And as a result, the AfCFTA's capacity to help Africa undergo this change will depend in part on how well the continent then transitions from existing trade and investment policies that are inward looking to building regional and continental value chains that reflect local comparative advantage. And to this end, maybe here I can mention that we have a number of mutual MOUs, a memorandum of understanding that we have signed with a number of key agencies and agents in the continent. And I think one of the ones that is important for you would be the Trademark East Africa. And I know that they will be making some presentations also either today or tomorrow. And then we also have discussions that we are in the process of undertaking with Equity Bank. And here Dr. Mwangi is very passionate about SMEs. And one of the key things that he mentioned to us in discussions with him, that whichever SMEs that they are ready to sponsor would have to be exporting made in Africa products, not to come up with some Chinese products to be traded in the continent, but actually made in Africa products. So one of the key things that he mentioned was the fact that you take products, especially, and his examples were actually in the agricultural sector. And he said, if you have a product or an agricultural product, and you just have a little value addition on it. And I was hearing the different engineers that were talking before I came in. And they mentioned a number of innovations that are ongoing. And he said, if you can just show the little value addition that you're having on the product, then Equity is ready to fund you. And one of the key elements why we are talking to them is we are looking for trade financing for SMEs. And this is one of the key areas that His Excellency Wamkele Mene, once as part of his legacy, that he was able to support small and medium enterprises during his tenure here at the AfCFTA Secretariat. And so when we talked with Dr. Mwangi, he did mention that their aim is to have about 5 million SMEs supported by Equity in Eastern and Central Africa. So if you do have a product that you want to take across the borders, then Equity would be one of the partners that you can already be considering. And we will soon be having a memorandum of understanding with Equity and trade finance. So I just felt that is an important element to mention at this juncture. So maybe then to move on with my presentation is that with that then AfCFTA capacity to help Africa will undergo the changes that Africa needs and depends in part on how well this continent transitions, as I have mentioned. And we will need to then be more open up and actually domesticate the AfCFTA agreement into our own national legislation, so as to have more SMEs trading across borders. Then one of the key elements we need to look at, and it's important here to highlight, is that regional value chains differ from national and global value chains. When considering our regional value chains, particular attention should be paid to the fact that these chains may be more susceptible to upgrading than global value chains, because all actors involved in the value chain in the former, that is the regional value chains, are situated within the region. Now, regional value chains provide several advantages for agribusiness SMEs, and this includes reduced transaction costs, which have prompted most multinational business to outsource manufacturing stages while keeping the most profitable parts of the supply chain in-house. And then it also includes specializing in certain activities rather than the complete product. And this, the continental integration, therefore, promises to increase labor productivity and total factor productivity through knowledge spillovers and technology transfer. So the innovation that we are undertaking then becomes very important, even to be able to transfer that knowledge across borders and to the continent as a whole. It will also, RVCs, that's regional value chains, will also allow nations to leverage their comparative and competitive advantages in order to engage in industries from which they would otherwise be excluded, and if they depended just on their own capabilities. Now, regional value chains also support the development of economies of scale, and here also, and this is the advantage that the Continental Agreement also brings on the table, the issue of economies of scale, and it also then enables the creation of specialized agglomerations, which are necessary for efficient involvement in high-value industries with fast-changing technology and associated skill sets. Then now, regional value chains will also enable firms to get access to lower-cost raw materials and remove other impediments to intra-African commerce. Now, when we look at specific opportunities that regional value chains will present to SMEs through the AfCFTA, we see the following advantages. The AfCFTA in this case, and maybe just to say the AfCFTA for those that may have joined us in the middle, is the African Continental Free Trade Area. Now, under that, we have the agreement. And this agreement then looks at lowering the time and expenses of transacting across borders through trade in services negotiations, trade in goods negotiations. And we also have a second phase of negotiations that will involve investment, competition policy, issues of digital trade, intellectual property rights, and also women and young people in trade. So those are protocols that we are working on now that will also enhance and ensure that we have free-flowing trade in goods and services across the continent. Now, state parties are currently undertaking trade negotiations that are liberalizing market, and the aim is to increase intra-African trade across the region. Some of the priorities that we have in the negotiations include the removal of tariff barriers, and that is where we are liberalizing tariffs, and also looking at non-tariff barriers that deal with also issues related to trading services. and also removal of the high taxes on foreign companies, market access, commercial presence regulations on foreign companies, and also licensing regimes and other barriers that may be involved. So the idea is that how can Africa trade more among themselves? And if this is implemented properly, then we will see savings in terms of costs and expenses for African agribusiness SMEs that will and also simplify and create enterprises across borders, in this case, in the continent. Furthermore, it is anticipated that intra-African trade in agriculture would expand as a consequence of the AfCFTA, resulting in an increase in income and market knowledge in the continent. The AfCFTA, through regional value chains, will create an enabling environment for the sharing of resources and skills across the continent. Just listening the other day, we had a meeting with the Continental engineers, and of course, engineering is basically in all the different levels of the value chains. And it was interesting when I was listening to the engineers that was speaking just before I came in. It was exactly what we were hearing in that meeting, that engineers are key and instrumental even in the creation of these regional value chains that we're talking about. And so that skill set needs to be, would I say, enhanced, such that the engineering professional services that we have in Kenya can then be exported even across the continent, the different countries in the continent, to enable the value chains, and to also then transfer the knowledge that you have in Kenya to the other African countries. And also the Kenyan engineers to also get more the knowledge transfer from the other parts of the continent. Here in Western and Western Africa, we have a lot of cassava and yam, and those are some of the products that are being considered for the different value chains. So how then do we ensure that Kenyan SMEs are also part of these continental value chains that we will be having through the AfCFTA Secretariat? Now, we see that the AfCFTA will also generate new market opportunities, and maybe also to say expanded market opportunities. With the AfCFTA now being considered the largest free trade area since the WTO was formed, and as far as the numbers of participating countries are concerned, with a GDP of $2.6 trillion and a population of 1.7 billion people, the AfCFTA free trade area will generate immense market opportunities for small and medium enterprises for the continent. The AfCFTA will also create a better regulatory environment for the growth of African business. This is in terms of the AfCFTA, which involves fewer or no tariff limitations and removal of non-tariff barriers and any other impediments to intra-African trade. Therefore, this means that African SMEs are projected to profit the most from the implementation of the AfCFTA. Now, we've talked a lot about the removal of tariffs, and maybe just to mention that in the removal of border barriers and tariffs in this case, we have developed what we call the modalities for negotiating tariff liberalization. And in those modalities, we have that tariffs are to be reduced. 90% of tariffs are to be removed in tariff lines, and those lines are negotiated then for that removal. And it's only 10% that will be removed after a number of years. 7 of that will be what we call a sensitive product, and 3% of that will be those products that countries feel they are not able to liberalize in the next few years. So what has been agreed is that none developed countries are given 10 years to liberalize to the 90%, and so they give their schedule of concessions. And then for LDC, that's the least developed countries, they are given 5 years. Now, there is still something that is being considered and negotiated, because you have countries that, regions that are customs unions, and so there is a mix of least developed countries and non-least developed countries. An example is the East African Community, where Kenya is the only developing country, so it's not a least developed countries, while all the other 5 members of the EAC are least developed countries. So there is some complication there that needs to be addressed, and so as to either agree to go with the 5 years or the 10 years. So it is now discussions that are ongoing, which one is the best for Kenya, and so how then do you push forward that issue at the continental level, so as to give them tariff liberalization concessions. Now, under tariff offers, we now have 28 state parties that have given their tariff offers, and we are waiting for the EAC to finalize theirs to get to their schedule or their offer to reduce their tariffs to the 90% reduction that I've mentioned. There is also work that we're doing for the liberalization of services sectors and the consequent removal of these non-tariff barriers that are in the services sector. I may be here just to mention that it is very clear that you will not be able to trade in the goods that have been liberalized if we do not liberalize also services sectors that are crucial enablers for trade, both in goods and services. And so the current negotiations in the area of trade in services are being undertaken, and that is in terms of developing the services offers. But the protocol itself, the protocol on trade in services that is guiding the liberalization process, has already been finalized and adopted by our African heads of state and government. Now, what was agreed is that we shall prioritize 5 sectors, and these are key sectors also that are instrumental for enabling goods and services, and these are in the areas of communication, business services, which also has professional services, financial services, and we also have tourism services, and I've mentioned financial transport services. So those are the key 5 sectors that we have prioritized for the area of trading services. And we have also developed the modalities for those negotiations, and we hope that this will be finalized by the end of this year, so that we can fully operationalize the start of trading under the AfCFTA. Now, I think I'll continue emphasizing, because this is one of my key areas and most of my experiences in the area of trading services, that services are central to the operation of value chains and commerce in general, with the private sector referring to the involvement of services in promoting cooperation between vendors and customers through support such as that in the distribution services, financial services, ICT, and other business services. The priority sectors that have been selected serve as a foundation for all other services. And maybe just to mention that now we have 41 countries that have already submitted their initial offers in the 5 priority sectors, with the majority of them offering significant improvements on their current status. And when we say current status, we are looking at the commitments that African countries have made under the General Agreement on Trading Services at the World Trade Organization, that's the WTO. Now, maybe just to say that when we were looking at the different value chains, we did identify a number of services sectors that are instrumental to enable value chains, the development of value chains. And one area that we shall be deeply diving into is the issue of transport and logistics services. And maybe here I can also mention that for Kenya, in their export strategy, they have actually indicated that trading services is one of the key areas that they will be pushing to ensure that whatever products that they have in the country are able to get into other markets. And in that case, you definitely have to then work on your trade in services area. Maybe just to finalize, I know I've taken longer, maybe more than I was given, the AfCFTA ability to catalyze this transformation in Africa is contingent on a successful transition period and the full implementation of the AfCFTA agreement. So far, it is fair to conclude that there is immense effort and strides that have been pursued and realized by the AU member states. And if all is effectively implemented, Africa has a very great future ahead. But we have to do our part, and the SMEs have to get more and more involved to also understand what kind of market access is being given by the different trading partners. And we are here at the Secretariat more than willing to assist in terms of even advocating for more openness and for the full implementation of the AfCFTA agreement. I'll stop there and thank you very much for the invitation and also for your kind attention. Thank you very much. Back to you, Professor.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Emily. And listening to you as the telephone farmer that I am, I feel all warm and fuzzy and excited and very hopeful that the Africa Continental Free Trade Area Agreement has such great potential for we people in the agribusiness space. It's getting very exciting, and we can see a lot of hope and a lot of future in this. When you think about the opportunities you've mentioned, the advantages, especially when thinking about value chains regionally, and the benefits that there are in terms of lower transaction costs, access to raw materials, access to labor, and also removing these tariff and non-tariff barriers. It's getting very, very exciting just to think of the prospects. And those of us who are not in this bandwagon, I think this is the time to jump in and benefit from it. Maybe just two quick questions before I pass on to Martin. I think you might have had at the tail end of the panel that was there before you, where one gentleman, the engineer, said that we're pushing the economic pillar or the economic agenda, a little bit on the social agenda, but the political one seems to have died with regard to development. And I don't know, without necessarily mentioning any countries, but what would you say about the level of support from the different, you call them state parties, with regard to the support that they're giving to your secretariat in terms of implementing the agenda that you are seeking to implement? So that is one question. And then the other one, you talked about Equity Bank and the role they are playing, and you're planning to sign an agreement with them, a partnership of some kind, because they're very keen to sort of reach out to businesses across the region and sort of make it easy to trade in the region. And I'm just wondering what other partners you feel you could or should engage with, that we can challenge to also reach out and engage with you to continue building this continental agenda of enhancing trade. So what other kinds of partners, apart from maybe financial services, do you see yourselves wanting to engage with? Thanks.
Thank you very much. I think, of course, that was the intention, to make everyone aware of the AfCFTA and the important strides we have done. And here maybe also to mention that we are getting a lot of support, I have to admit, from the Assembly of Heads of State and Government. The presidents and the head of governments are very, very keen on the AfCFTA. Now, just as an example, the agreement was actually signed in March 2018 in Kigali, Rwanda. By May of 2019, it had entered into force after 22 ratifications, as I mentioned. That already shows the interest and the support that we are getting from state parties. We are now at, effectively, it's 41 ratifications with 38 state parties that have given, have deposited their instruments of ratification. That already tells you that nearly all, because we only have one country that has not signed. Out of the 55 member states of the AU, only Eritrea has not signed. And that already shows you the interest that they have in the AfCFTA. Now, our work at the Secretariat is really to push for the implementation of the agreement. And so far, even this coming weekend, we will be having a meeting of ministers, and they're looking at how then to finalize the negotiations on rules of origin. Of course, it takes time, but we are now at about 87% of the tariff lines that have been agreed on when it comes to rules of origin. And the aim is to get to the 90% that we have been mandated by the heads of state and government. And the ministers, the heads of states are really following up with us to make sure that, that we get to meet the targets and the deadlines that we have been given. So I can actually say we are getting a lot of support from not only governments, but also partners. Now, I have mentioned at the regional level partners that we are working with. We are working with the regional economic communities, and for Kenya, that is the East African community, COMESA, and all the other regional communities. We actually even had a meeting here that that involved the Secretary General of the ESC and of COMESA, who came in person to actually participate in the meetings and showed a lot of support. We are working with the Trademark East Africa, and here with the Trademark East Africa, it is the success that they've had in the East African region that we need for them to emulate in the other parts of the continent, so that it will be easy for Kenyan SMEs to move into the other parts of the continent, let's say for in the Central African region, West African region, the North African region. So we truly hope that that experience will be emulated in the rest of Africa, and that what we call the corridors shall be opened up for transport and logistics. Now, what we are doing with equity, and it's not only equity we have approached, but actually we can actually say equity approached us, but we have also approached other commercial banks. We have EcoBank, we have Stanbic, that are going to work with us to ensure that we have trade financing for SMEs in the continent. Then on the telecommunication side, we then need to agree on the telecom side with the different players, so that we can also reduce or eliminate, if possible, the roaming charges. Because if calling is so expensive, then our internet charges are so expensive, then we will not be able to have a digital trade and communication that we need, or the innovation that we need. So those are also partners that you can help us to reach. Then apart from telecom areas, you have your transport and logistics players. So those are also instrumental for ensuring that the value chains work, and that we are able to then move from one region to another. So in a nutshell, we need to get all the partners on board in the telecom sector, and even to ensure that we deal with our issues as relates to digital trade, and also protection of IPR. Maybe what I can say under the what we call phase 2 issues, we have intellectual property rights, we have investment, we have competition policy, digital trade, and also women and young people in trade. So I'll get you, Professor, to actually come to one of our meetings when we are talking about women in trade. So, and even trade policy, to get more involved in trade policy, because if we have more let's say women or young people in trade policy, then the issues that relate to these areas then are put on the forefront to be able to address at the higher levels. Yeah, so in a nutshell, that's the answer to your question.
Great, thank you. That was very extensive, a very comprehensive response. Thank you very much, Emily. And we certainly would want to continue engaging with you even post this conference. Back to you, Martin.